Our guest speaker, Matt Yannopoulos. Matt is currently the Chief Operating Officer at the Department of Health, and he took up that role in July 2018. But at least to say that's not all he's done. His position, he's responsible for the department's corporate areas, including finance, legal, corporate services, health state network, human resources, communications, and IT. Matt was awarded the Public Service Medal in January of this year for his outstanding public service work through the leadership and delivery of the reform to the payments for childcare, and I believe he'll talk a little bit more about that in his speech. So well done, Matt. You should be congratulated on that. So a fantastic career and in both accounting and information technology, and I'd like you to join with me in welcoming Matt to the stage.
Thanks, Rob. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out on a freezing cold. Okay, Mark, a few familiar faces in the audience. What I'm going to do, can I just get a show of hands? People who are project managers. A few. People who have attended steering committees. Most of you. So I'm going to try and tailor this talk to, what good governance looks like, and I'll set a bit of context about why I probably am standing up here. Talk through a case study that was the childcare reform implementation. Talk a bit about now where health is going. And where we're kind of learning some of our own lessons. I'll try and keep it interesting. Governance is probably not the biggest draw card, although I'm pleased to see the room pretty full. But if you want to stop, because the group's not that big, and interrupt me and debate something, we can do that, or I can just do some questions at the end. But some context about why this is kind of current and something to talk about. So doing digital in this town means redefining the way customers or citizens are interacting with our systems. In order to do that across government, you need people to pull in the same direction. And in many cases, that doesn't happen. And the PM, in recent talks to the APS and then also to secretaries, has made a big thing about improving service delivery. And you'll see some of the jargon there, congestion busting, which is, the way we're interpreting it in my place is get out of the road, get rid of the red tape, and think about what it looks like for a consumer accessing that service. But when you're working in government, you're often working with layers of challenge in implementation, because at some point in some past day, something went wrong, and the government, or particularly the APS's response to that, is normally to add some more layers or some more process. Rob kindly introduced the recent roles, but I have kind of changed my career from someone who was an IT person, at least I thought I was, to a finance person. So I'm FCPA now, and am largely responsible for the health budget, which is about $100 billion. But when I finished doing the health budget, I got this great opportunity to go and lead the government's childcare reforms. And let me just quickly conceptualise what good governance, and I'll talk about childcare in a second. PM&C have a whole host of stuff about what good governance looks like. Transparency, people know what's going on. Correct leadership, clear accountabilities, It's no more than you need, so the least burdensome is the right amount, and it's responsive to issues. And I want to talk a little bit in length about childcare reform, because I suspect many of you who've attended steering committees will be able to resonate with some of the bits I talk about, and I want to talk about my current world. So I was away skiing in the May of 2017. I get a phone call from a deputy in education to say, would you like to come and run the government's childcare reform implementation? It's due for implementation in 14 months' time. It's just had its second gateway review and it's red. As I joked, with a surname like Yannopoulos, you've clearly got all the way down the alphabet before you've rung me. And I said, well, I'll need to talk to my secretary, Martin Bowles, and they said it's okay. He's already said it's okay for you to go. I wasn't sure whether that was a vote of confidence or a vote of good riddance. In arriving at this job, the first conversation is with Minister Birmingham and Minister Tudge, who was then Human Services. And the introduction to this program was welcome. It is now clear whose fault it is if this thing doesn't land. And in case you haven't picked it up, it's mine. And if it's successful, well, we'll take credit and it'll be good. But in arriving, I kind of, asked a few questions because the program's been running for about 2.5 years by that stage. Do we have a plan, an integrated plan of all the activities? No. Do we have a good understanding of the change management task in front of us? No, we're thinking about that though. We're going to get on to that. Are we clear on the IT build, given it's going to be a significant one? No, we've got a lot of issues. We're arguing with our provider, which was Human Services, and it's not looking good, hence the gateway reviews. But in a scale sense, there'd been a couple of $100 million dedicated by government to build the new system. We needed all families who currently get childcare, who in those days got childcare rebate or childcare benefit, to do something, because there was new information that the government didn't possess, and the nature of that was in the activity that a family or sole parent has that would be allowable for childcare rebate or childcare benefit. And we needed 1.2 million of those. We had 6,000 childcare providers across the country whose main game is looking after children, not contributing to government policy change. At the start, we had 24 software providers who make their living out of selling software to childcare providers to manage childcare services. And we paid out about $9 billion per annum. The Gateway Review said they have no confidence it's going to deliver because there appear to be 3 senior responsible officers. 1 in education and 2 in human services. And what was very clear is nobody was actually taking any responsibility to achieve the government's outcomes. Hence, they get down the alphabet and they invite me in because I thought it sounded interesting. And the boss had already said, yeah, he's okay to go. And that's one thing I've learned about being a senior public servant. You just do as you're told. That makes it a bit easier. So multiple senior responsible officers. I don't think I've got the numbers there. about 17 steering committees. Every steering committee had its own risk register. When I sort of assembled all of this stuff, I said, who's looking at any of these risk registers? Because I'd go to the committee time and time again. Well, nobody. What are we doing with all the issues that are being tracked in each of the forums? Well, nothing. We're counting them and they're getting older and not getting resolved. And so the first part was relatively straightforward. I had a fortnightly meeting with ministers, which kind of creates the right amount of urgency, because I can't tell them next fortnight what I told them the last fortnight, because they'll detect that. And in the case of this, without it being publicly reported, those two ministers weren't best buddies. So there wasn't a lot of support for each other, but there was a lot of, if it's all wrong, it'll be the other's fault. And so, you know, a key lesson for me is have a single senior responsible officer, and I'll come to why that's important in the health context. But what I did was, because I'm reporting to the ministers and two secretaries, it was relatively easy to just put forward some positions, particularly if I'm going to be held accountable. So the first thing I did was get rid of all of those steering committees. We created one, the steering committee that sits underneath me, which I chaired. That made any decisions needed to get the program to deliver. Each risk was re-workshopped, owned by generally a band 2, and on every meeting I made 3 of the risks, I think we probably had 20 in the end, 3 risks be updated by that person. Come and tell me how those mitigations are going. Instead of, you know, the log that's attached to the steering committee that everyone kind of skips through because no one has any interest in it. Are those mitigations working? If not, what else should we do? That was quite an important piece. And so the steering committee had, I guess, 8 or so first assistant secretaries, but it also had PM&C, the DTA, finance were invited, but always worried that if they turned up, somehow they were giving me some support, and so they chose not to. DSS, DHS, and education. And most importantly to me was, that's the only decision-making forum in the governance process for formal project. The other thing I did was create a sponsor group though, which I also chaired, but it was co-chaired with the education policy lead, Jackie. And the most important thing about the sponsor group is keeping the senior executives, the band 3s, supporting the agenda when it starts getting hard, because it was always going to get hard. And so I had the CIO from Human Services, the head of the Service Delivery Network, who at that time was Barry Jackson, so he runs the front of house and call centres in Human Services, and the head of program design. So I had the 3 deputy secretaries from DHS, 2 of us from education, and the relevant deputy from DSS. All I do at sponsor group is tell them what the risks are and what we're doing about it. It's not a full status update, that's done at the steering committee. Not to confuse them, but that was also key when things got difficult, particularly as we went close to delivery. We might need more resources, and so having the CIO there kind of through the journey was important. The other key thing though was something I'd learned 100 years ago at the tax office, which was a weekly issues forum. 2 o'clock Friday afternoon. always a Friday because people are exhausted and I can get my way. When you do it on a Monday, the first thing is, can we have a couple of days to write this issue up, to do more consultation? That doesn't work. The teams had collected lots of issues and weren't resolving them. By getting people with momentum, and anybody who wants to come is welcome. So steering committee members, team members, EL1s, EL2s, it doesn't matter. It was a big room. I'd do it on the phone as well as physically. But it's really, we're going to resolve these things today because it's a lesson from the tax office. If you have a big program, making or not making decisions is making decisions because you've lost the opportunity to change the course. In this case of this program, at peak 450 people. It's very expensive to not be dealing with issues when they arise. And do we make some bad ones? Of course. But momentum and tempo is everything. And so a key lesson is going a bit quicker. And, you know, we report how long the issue's been there. So it'll be okay, not everything got resolved. If we didn't have enough information, we go, well, I don't know, unless it was critical, in which case we make a decision. The final bit that I should just draw out on that slide is the independent assurer. So when I arrived, there were like 3 different parties doing assurance over the process, a number of different consulting houses doing PMOs. We made the decision, 1 PMO, KPMG won that, 1 independent assurer, PwC won that. The independent assurer invited to steering committee, there for the whole thing, invited to sponsor group, invited to issues, and, you know, could freely disagree with me. Still had lots of projects, but that central PMO was how I kind of made sense of what we were trying to do and what the issues were. Couple of reflections though. Working across agencies is really hard. Cultures are different. Important when you've got, so as I've said to colleagues who are trying to do delivery with human services at the moment, it's easier when you have priority. I had priority, ministers were involved, secretaries were involved. I never had to ring to say I'm not getting any traction because everybody knew this was something that was important to government. It was a very big change that they needed to go well, and they were terrified it was going to go badly. But as I've watched programs that I'm working on in health at the moment that are working across human services or DSS or others, I'd observe that this is not the way the APS naturally operates. And so you've got to invest in it. And that means multi-layer. So you need a sponsor group or something when you're trying to bind organisations to work together. You need a steering committee that spans the multiple agencies, that's got some teeth and people respect. Got to have only one SRO. It's something I'm driving in health at the moment. Oh no, I'm a deputy SRO. Don't know what that is. There's only one person who's accountable. If you want to have a deputy, that's okay, but they don't have any of the accountability. We want to make it clear what that is. If you're doing a big thing, you need skilled people to do your PMO. It's not a place you put people who you're not sure what they are good at. It is difficult to deal with complex schedules. In the case of my program, I don't know what there was, 16 projects at peak. For some projects, the project managers weren't very skilled. So I'd say the PMO, get in there, help them, break the milestones down, work out what they've got to do, work out what resources they need, work out what the issues are. And then, by the way, help me understand for the thousands of lines in our schedule, where the hell things are at. Because I would always get different data points. From the insurers, I should commit suicide, there's no chance I'm going to make it. From the individual project managers, it's all going great, yet all my milestones I've missed. And you know, what's that old adage, old truism? Past performance is the best predictor of future performance. So maybe you're not going as well as you think you are. And so having a good PMO, really important. The issues process that I talked about, people used to laugh. Really? Every week? Yep. And attendance happened because things got decided. And people were worried that it'd get decided and they wouldn't have had their say. I published a log. I think we probably wound back 1 or 2 decisions when someone worked out that it was got a few more issues. But overall, hundreds we work through. You hear this a bit these days, multidisciplinary teams. When it's hard and you don't have any time, and particularly when you've already committed to your external dates, you've got to bring all your people together. And so we went through a phase from starting around Christmas time, so this is 6 months out, we wanted to start some of our change management where we were just miles behind. I said, well, let's kind of short circuit this. Let's have the developers, the analysts, the business, the policy people, all co-located, no choice, land it. Near enough will be good enough. And it worked pretty well, actually. There's no doco to explain how the system was created, but it did pay people on the 2nd of July like it was supposed to, so that's okay. And then finally, my comment about independent assurers. I think I'll come to health, but independent assurers are really important because you can convince yourself you're okay. Particularly if people are working hard. When people are working 6 or 7 days a week, you need to know that it's going all right. And you need someone else to say, well, here's a couple of watch points. And so talking a bit about assurance, a couple of things that I've taken forward into health. Key thing is it has to be real time or as close to real time as possible. It's not an auditing function. It's not something that says, here's some proposed findings and recommendations. Now spend 3 weeks arguing about the form. My rule was you have 48 hours to disagree the facts. Otherwise, I'm saying that I agree and we'll get on with it. That kind of shocked people because people are used to a process where you get an independent scrutineer and you spend time arguing about it. You try and water it down, you try and obfuscate the accountability. Well, in this case, I just didn't let people have the time. Is the facts wrong? No, the facts are right, good. The recommendations stand. Go to the steering committee. You're on the hook. These ones you own, you have to make it happen. And PMO makes sure that drives through. But you can see some of the key takeaways. Keep talking about it. We got the assurers, we worked with the steering committee to work out where are the risky areas across the schedule. And let's make sure we do some deep dives before those risky areas become issues. We kept reassessing, we'd say, oh, we thought this would be a problem, it's turning out not to be, don't worry about looking at that. Can you help me with what's going on with the MDTs, the multidisciplinary teams? And you'll see the final point is that 48 hours. So the end result was in the final 2 weeks, because in the meantime, I'd won a job as Chief Operating Officer at Health. the longest negotiation between secretaries to get a senior officer released. I won it in January. I wasn't allowed to go until the 9th of July. I think I heard a minister say to me the other day, yeah, we've thought one of the lessons is actually we'll hold a person for another year, because there's been a few little challenges after the 1 year anniversary in reconciliation. I could have predicted that. But the main game was pay subsidy for all of those people. We got more than 1 million Australian families to complete through MyGov, think about the reputational issues associated with MyGov, through a co-designed, user-centred user-tested I should say, workflow, which went through N iterations to get it as lean, as pre-filled and as good as possible. Got more than 1 million. And you know, I did not predict we'd get there. We had tracking and knew what we were doing. 8 of our software providers quit the business because of the scale of the change that we were making. Co-designed all of the service interfaces. When I arrived, they were at war with the agencies and there were no specs within CUI. We changed our design to make it more able to be adopted by the software providers. We didn't pay the software providers, but we co-designed the interfaces, another huge lesson, and supported them through the, and just to go idea of scale, so there's 1.8 million children in childcare at any one time. I wanted a report per child per day at the end of the week. So you want 10 million session reports submitted online. DHS had never done anything of that scale and volume. They pay a lot of people, but not with a big external feed outside of the Medicare systems, and they don't process in those sorts of volumes on a peak basis. But anyway, it worked. We had a little glitch, which was fairly tiny on payments, but overall, ministers were happy, and I was allowed to leave and go and start my next journey. We're going for time. So when I came back to health though, because I've had all this rich project management and program management experience, I realised, or I believed, that actually we'd lost our way in the last 1 year in the health department. I could tell it by case study. So we had this rather infamous program called the National Cancer Screening Register, where we had contracted Telstra Health. Telstra Health was a subsidiary of Telstra. They'd bought a whole heap of software products that, you know, they were convinced, and they'd convinced us through tender that they would be able to cobble them together and re-platform Australia's bowel register, which is currently run by Human Services, and the cervical screening register, which was then run by 8 state and territories. So it also coincided with changes to health policy and how screening would be done. So relatively risky project. I was in health when we watched that project struggle. Go red, struggle, go bang, serious consequences for the senior officials, minister very unhappy, and so we set up like a critical projects board. But since a number of us had kind of wandered off to do other things, all that had stopped. No one could remember why we were doing that. And health runs a lot of change. We don't have a very big IT shop in comparison to colleagues who are here from Defence. But it's still, we spend about 100 million a year on IT. But we run a lot of projects with third parties. And Telstra Health is an example of a third party that was worth about $150 million to build this thing. and it didn't go very, as I say, it didn't go very well. So what I wanted to do though is I also observed no one does anything the same way. It's not a unique thing to policy agencies, but it was certainly a feature there. And so what we've been going on about is a single approach to project management, so templates, a single system, which is really complicated, SharePoint. I can extract from it the highest risk projects, and we've tiered all of our projects, so tier 1 being risky, and that's a board I chair. Tier 2 and 3 go to a different board. PMOs, we currently have about 22 PMOs. Each division has their own. My boss, the secretary, a bit concerned about that. Why does everyone need their own PMO? Can't you just have one? Well, maybe, but the maturity is so low that we need to just kind of let it build. And if they can all adopt a consistent approach, that'd be good too. So we're making them adopt a consistent approach in the tool and in templates. But also the final point, project management is a specialist discipline. You can be accredited to be a great project manager. I think it's important that we do. Go back to all at the start. PM focused on implementation. Project managers are key to helping that be successful. Governance is important too, but project managers are like a key to translating. And it's not just the tools, it's how you lead, it's how you understand what you're trying to do. And that is an area of great focus. So key things we have done. So all those projects were not visible to executive board. They kind of just happen. We trust our senior people. Of course, my organisation's filled with health policy people. They can spell project, but they're pretty sure that's something someone else should do. And indeed, they have plenty of industry partners in here, in my organisation. Every consulting firm is working in health on one or more projects with their own approach. That part's probably not bad, because generally private sector firms who hold their shingle out can do repeatable projects, but it's not consistent. The highest risk projects, nobody had any visibility of. And my goal was not to have another cancer screening where we kind of watch it, glad we're not on the steering committee, and watch it fail. So I now directly chair that investment and implementation board. The other side is program assurance. So we run, so I've mentioned $100 billion a year, Medicare, that's 24 billion, pharmaceutical benefits, about 10 billion, grants, private health insurance, my health record, we've got lots of them. How do you know they're going okay? So the other thing I didn't say in intro is PM's asking for measures at the moment. KPIs. And when you look at many of our programs, when you get the senior people in a room and say, so how's private health insurance going? Well, how do we all think private health insurance is going? That's right. People are leaving. Youth see no value in the product. It keeps getting more expensive. So what are we doing about it? Prime Minister is pretty keen to keep private health insurance in some form. Public hospitals can't afford, if we gave them the $6 billion we spend on the rebate, that'd dry up really quickly and then we'd have a much bigger problem. So getting those sorts of programs, and in fact we did private health insurance a few weeks ago. How do you know it's working? What are you doing about it? And getting that increased governance and some half clever people sitting there thinking about how they can assist. We've created a couple of central teams that support these committees. Just reinforcing my point about you need expertise. I often joke that the portfolio support unit, that's my PMO with a brain. It's not about just stapling together all the reports. It's trying to help me go, where do I need to help? And so on my investment committee, I have the CIO, the head of HR, the chief lawyer. Why? Because that's how you help. CIO, get some more people to go and help that project. Head of HR, move some resources. They need these sorts of people. And so using that kind of philosophy about what's good governance is, you've got to help. It's not about just going on the committee. It's about getting something out of it. And I think I've hit the reporting. So some key takeaways. You've got to get buy-in though to change governance because it's burdensome. The easy bit was the first bit where I said, I think we should do this in a consistent way. And everybody said, yeah, of course, 5 buckets full. What they were pretty sure I was talking about is somebody else because they were already world's best class. And maybe that was true for one of the 22 PMOs, but I'm not sure. And so now the rubber's hitting the road because they're saying, oh, what? I have to report status every month? Yeah. It's a project. If you can't report status every month, you've got no idea where you are. I'd like some milestones. Milestones? I don't know what the milestones are. Sorry, you've told me you're the project manager. You can't be a project manager if you don't know what the milestones are for this activity. So go back to basics. One approach, one system, reporting, simplified governance. My PACE message, that's really important. I've got consultants in that can help. And the thing I'm trying to resist my boss doing is saying, can't you just set all the rules and tell everybody they have to adhere to it by next week? Well, I could, but it won't work. This is a capability building process. We are trying to risk assess, so we've got some sophistication, and people say, oh, I think I'm a tier 2 because I'm this big and that big, and we've got matrices, but actually it's about a conversation. Because the main game in health is lifting the capability and avoiding another cancer screening register. Now that we're kind of getting there, and I've got an update tomorrow for our executive board, which is the highest body. I've got 180 projects in the status machine. I've got a board meeting of investment board where we're going through the top 12 tier 1 projects where honesty is starting to emerge. 3 are red, 4 are amber, and what's happening is a culture change because they're not seeing red, let's go and have a go at some people because they haven't been doing it, how are we going to help? And so that will enable us to really start to focus on these other issues around internal controls, around KPIs, but for this audience I'll skip over that. Okay, so final couple of key things from me. It's not a nice to have good governance. As I've said to some folks in finance the other day, it's also not just that wiring diagram. It's all the terms of reference that relate to each of the steering committees. It's the how you do it. Pet hate from numerous places I've worked is people preparing talking points for executives who are about to attend a meeting because the executive hasn't read any of the paperwork. It's a complete waste of time. It's a waste of time for the people who are writing them, and it's an even bigger waste of time for that person attending the meeting because they're clearly not intellectually engaged in the content. It has to be about what are you doing there? What are you trying to manage for the organisation? You can always make it better. I'll use my childcare example, 18 steering committees, lots of people writing minutes, attending meetings, talking points in the left-hand side, facing briefs, no decisions getting taken. If you're attending a steering committee and it all seems a bit perfunctory, you possibly should tell the chair, what's the point of this? The SRO is about accountability. It's a big thing for me. There can only be one, and they're accountable. For budget, for outcome, for success, for failure. They should have one project, they should have a project manager. They might have one, they might have many, depending on the scale of the project or program they're responsible for. The PM is responsible to make sure all of the pieces are happening and being reported upon and being driven. But the accountability, one thing that has been surprising to me is in building this system, they said, oh, we needed a process to approve status reports. What? Well, we're not sure we'll agree with the project manager. I think the two of you should have a meeting because I'm not sure how you can not. Either the PM's not good, in which case you should manage it, or they're right, in which case you should do something about it. But watering down stuff is never that helpful. And senior executives, if they're useful, shouldn't be afraid of bad news. And that's something I have certainly learned. People are very skilled at telling you only the bits that they want you to know. And so I really could want to reinforce that. So good project management, PMO skills. It's not a place where you put people you don't know what to do with. It's really about that's value. Make decisions. And then if it's big enough and ugly enough, have a third party whose only vested interest is they're associated with it and they'd like it to be successful. But can keep an SRO in check if they're a bit too overconfident. That's it. But we did have a testing process where we then matched all the requirements and said, is that met, that met. But, you know, I think I mentioned I cut the reporting stuff away. There were 600 reports defined. There's 300 people in education that manage early childhood. Who was going to look at 600 reports? It's just like, I'm convinced through that large-scale process that historical requirements definition is not a good way to build IT systems. I haven't kind of got as far as I can out, what do you do fundamentally differently, but it's something around MDT, multidisciplinary teams, but you need, as I told the DHS executive, you need a solution designer, architect, some enterprise architects to say, here's what it's got to look like and here are the rules. And we had some, but their method is heroes. And I was lucky because I had plenty of them. And I mean, one of the ladies, she's acting SES now, she didn't have a day off for like 9 months. She worked through Christmas, worked Saturday, Sunday. She was a SAP tech lead. She never seemed to run out of puff though. Like I can't work 7 days a week. But she just kept on going. I say, you're going to have a day off at some point? We won't make it if I have a day off. All right, keep working then, because I need to make it. Okay? All right, thanks very much.
So I think from that applause probably says it all, Matt, in that it was, thank you for giving us a very informative and engaging.
As long as it's not too dull, governance.
Yes, brought the governance topic, and I think what I appreciated, I suppose, the most brought that governance topic to life, and your honesty in sharing the good stories and the not so good stories was very much appreciated by all. So we have a small token of appreciation, and if you just put your hands together and thank Matt for his time this evening.
Thank you, Robert. I'm Rella Rummick, the Territory Manager here for ACS Branch, and I just had a couple of updates before we break into networking. Firstly, Matt, thank you for that robust presentation. I'm sure the audience will leave with an extensive list of takeaways, and you certainly did bring governance to life, as Robert said. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome on board our new corporate sponsor, Synergy Group. It's great to have you here today, and we look forward to engaging with you over the next 12 months and further. Great to have Rob and the team here today. So thank you for supporting this event and look forward to working with you. It's also great to have so many existing members in the room and great to see some new faces. So thank you for supporting today's event, and we look forward to seeing you at future events. Now I have an exciting announcement. Many members would have seen over the last few months that we ran a competition. Everyone loves a competition. And the purpose of this competition was really around our members achieving 100% profile rate on their member profile, so that we as a local branch can make sure that we are tailoring our events and engagement to your needs. So thank you for all of those that participated. And I also encourage all of you to keep an eye out for the next competition and make sure that you also participate. So we would like to announce the winner, Andrew Speechley from Lockheed Martin. Are you here today? Oh, please come up. We've got a prize for you. Oh, sorry. Janelle's camera's not working. Anyone else want to take a photo? Thank you. And I encourage you all to continue the conversation and keep connecting for the networking segment. Thank you again. shaking at my presence.